apathy of the government itself. Like, a reporter works really hard for the story, gets all the inputs from the ground, gets the expert comments, and once geologists themselves are saying that okay, this has been done in a wrong manner, like this highway was supposed to be in this way, they are doing it this way, it's going to be catastrophic in nature. The scientists are saying this, and the government very easily ignores. So even if you report, and it's just not like one individual or one organization, even if multiple organizations report on it continuously, government still has a way of ignoring the warning signs until it is too late, and which is something that we have experienced in J&K as well. The main connecting line between Jammu and Kashmir, which is the national highway, it has had enormous landslides, repeated landslides in one particular area, and the geologists were like talking about that particular area for years, saying that this is going to be a problem area, please do not cut the road on this side, this is going to be catastrophic in nature, people are going to lose their lives when they drive down this road. They gave warning and warning and warning signs, and government ignored them. And now damage control is being done, but now it's too late. So that happens with these climate stories a lot. That even if people end up reporting, first they are not allowed to report, even if they end up reporting, there's still an apathy from government that they do not care what is being reported about coal and all these international organizations that are working in the global south, that talk about these issues that are affecting the global south, and they raise those issues in COP26 or all these international conferences about climate change. And the work that they do is that they get journalists, they provide them fellowships for those journalists to actually visit and cover those meetings, international meetings, and understand how West is responding to all these queries, all these issues that are being faced by the people living in the global south, and especially in the South Asian region. There has been an increase in reporting on climate change and in international media specifically because the space has opened up. There are more websites like Mongabay, there are many other websites that actually commission those stories from these developing nations, from Himalayan states, from these regions, and they do find a space in the international media. And what that does is whenever somebody is like preparing for a conference, preparing their data for talking about these issues at an international forum, they do cite the examples of these things that are actually being reported in those regions. So it can be explained in a much more easier manner that whenever we say that US, UK or all these countries need to reduce their carbon footprint, they need to take responsibility for all the carbon emissions that have been done in the years, then this is the impact that the people are facing, and they actually need to be not just accountable in terms of their carbon footprint but also financially. They need to actually contribute more in making sure that whatever the impact of climate change is being felt in the global south, it has to be compensated by them because they are the ones responsible, and they have to be held accountable for all the damages that are done due to climate catastrophe, for all such damages that people have to bear and all the loss of livelihood. They need to be compensated monetarily to make sure that at least people who are the developing nations who still do not have that strong an economy don't have additional burden of dealing with the fact that the UK and US and all these Western countries did not take responsibility for whatever they were doing. Until and unless a flash flood comes and it wipes out an entire village, it wipes out an entire set of people who were living downstream, mainly because they were not warned beforehand that this area is under threat. And recently, when I talk about it, there are Indian states are very vulnerable because from 9,575 glaciers in the Himalayan region, nearly 200 are susceptible to outbursts. And when the researchers were finding out about these, it was seen that already between 2000 to 2010, at least 20 GLOFs were recorded in Jammu and Kashmir, and it cost nearly $10 million in damages. So when I say that climate catastrophes should also be seen with a humane perspective and with an economic angle, it's because when we talk about sustainable development is always thought about with a thrust on in infrastructure development, especially in a region like Jammu and Kashmir. In an ecologically fragile area, when you talk about development, it has to be sustainable. But generally, when government think of plans, they do not think of sustainability. They think of what is visible to people and what can be sold during elections. So they talk about infrastructure projects, ring roads, and dams and hydroelectric projects without thinking how all these projects are going to impact the money is now going to be spent in rebuilding that area, but of course the lives lost can never be compensated again. So when we talk about climate catastrophe in media, the first thing that needs to be done is connecting the dots. Like you have to have a collaboration with all the people who are doing data journalism and collecting data of how the climate is changing and how it will impact certain ecologically fragile areas like the Himalayan regions and areas like Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand, Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, all the nearby areas. How is it going to impact them? And then specific regions which are either seismic zones, which are people living in downstream areas that are going to be most impacted, and then that data should be used collaboratively by people by journalists from all the countries when they are doing their reportage. So someone researching in India does not have to write one report that is focused solely on India, because if a glacier melts somewhere near the Himalayas, it's not going to impact just India, it's not going to impact just one region, it's going to impact a lot of countries and a lot of other people as well. So there has to be collaboration when it comes to data. And secondly, very little research work is being done about connecting the dots of how the changes in temperature or how this climate change is actually a major factor when it comes to these extreme weather events. Generally, when we even talk about pitching such stories to editors, what they say is that they're very conscious about using the term climate change, and if you want to use the term climate change, you have to at least spend 6 to 10 months or even a year just collecting data to convince the editor that this is in fact because of climate change, and that's not possible for every single reporter to do. So that's why I believe that these are the two things that need to be thought about. A, the economic impact of the climate catastrophe, so it can be put in with an urgency when you are convincing someone that this is a story that needs to be told, that if the damage is done, this much money will be needed afterwards, and otherwise also this much damage can be done. And secondly, collaboration when it comes to data. Thank you.
Right. And also the meaning of sustainable development, and the government should be concerned about how the SDGs should be implemented, not only in the infrastructure but also physical development, but also for the human development. And at last, that you very rightfully portrayed that some key recommendations, that the data should be collected and it should be collaborated with other agencies, stakeholders, the role of media, this impact assessment, and how we can spread the data. And also, one of the main key messages that I also learned is that evidence-based information. We call in our advocacy sector evidence-based advocacy, but for the media, it's evidence-based information is most necessary, to minimize the catastrophe of the climate. Thank you very much.
So leaders. That is because a publication, when you are pitching a climate change story, they want data, they want you to use an expert comment, they want you to use all the information that is available about a climate catastrophe, and if you put a humane angle on it, good for you. But what the reader expects is, how is this going to impact me? Is it going to be an immediate impact? Why should I care about this? And there is a huge difference between the two, and the journalist has to literally juggle between managing the expectations of the publication and ensuring that the story is written in such a way, with such a narrative, that people can connect with it as well. Like I'll tell you, a saffron grower in Kashmir is not going to care about what you're writing, whether what are you writing about, growing heat wave, this is happening, that is happening. He will care if you tell him that maybe 10 years from now your crop yield is going to reduce by 30% because of these reasons. Then he'll be interested to find out how is this happening, why is this happening, what can be done about it. Similarly, when you talk about these vulnerable areas where earthquakes are very common, when you tell them that these many people have a chances of being displaced, losing their homes, losing their livelihoods because of these environmental factors, that is when the people will start caring about these stories. But then again, the publications also need to understand that using those jargons, the climate, the environmental jargon, the experts, the exact words that they use, that is the responsibility of a journalist to make sure that the story is explained in such a way that it is not that one expert is commenting and only another expert is able to understand that. It should be easily understandable for the common masses and the common people as well. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense. We are like, whenever we report on something, it has like two purposes, main purposes. One is in information dissemination, so more and more people become aware about a phenomena, get aware about a phenomena. And second is so any change can come out of it, and government also understands that this is going to have some kind of impact and any action needs to be taken on the same. So that balance needs to be created in the way of storytelling and in managing the expectations of both the publication and the readers, which is a very difficult task, because I mean there are so few journalists who are focusing just on climate change and reporting just on climate change, and that is the main reason why such stories do not make headlines, because there are very few people who are actually writing about this thing, and it takes a lot of time to report on climate change. Like I mentioned, like it takes you 7 to 8 months to create a database and work extensively on just like one topic, and then getting a proper publication for that particular story and for it to then later make an impact. There needs to be an increase in the number of such stories and increase in the number of journalists who are working on such stories.
Those 500 houses being cracked are hundreds of families displaced.
Yeah, I was just talking to one of the journalists present here only, and he mentioned that you can do the geographical mapping to kind of understand that how many houses are impacted now versus how many houses would be impacted in the coming days, and then telling those stories through human eyes. Like you can find one person who lived in one of those homes and he spent every single penny he had in creating that home and building that house, and now he has to leave that house and have nowhere else to go because of these cracks that are developing. And then you can mention that this is not just the story of one person, but the story of many others that are going to be living in camps, and they are going to be shifted to other locations where they will become landless, mainly because of environmental reasons, where they will have to find alternate sources of livelihood because their livelihood depended on agricultural land which they had in their village, which is not going to be like it is not going to be safe for them to live there anymore. So that is one angle that you can pursue in trying to make sure that how is it impacting the people, and that makes the story more attractive for others to listen, because maybe there are other villages that are being impacted in similar ways but have not made the connection yet. And secondly, like you asked, like do we ever feed it to the national media or international media to make sure that these stories don't just remain on a regional level or on a local level? People do try, and sometimes it does happen that whenever regional media starts reporting on an issue, and like most of the digital portals or small newspapers start reporting on an issue repeatedly, the national media does pick it up sometimes.